thoughtfully. "Now he is your biological father," Kelly exclaimed. "Oh my God, Jerry, never think otherwise, please." "Yes, I understand. Of course it's true," he admitted meekly. "You're completely correct, Kelly. He is my father, and I love him regardless of whether he is my biological father. I know he loves me. He's always loved me and will always be my true father. Thank you." Kelly sobbed and reached across the table to hold his hand for a few heartfelt seconds. The brother and sister linked hands and expressed their anguish. Kelly hated telling her brother the truth, but he needed to know. After a few moments, Jerry shook his head. What a disaster is going on here. Tony is a jerk for taking advantage of her, and her mother is an imbecile. Poor Dad. I can only image his feelings over her betrayal. His family. She stated that she was upset and needed Tony's help. Kelly used a harsh tone. Of course, old Uncle Tony is delighted to help her. She repressed her hatred and continued. But, as feared, Dad now despises him. He made it obvious to Tony, and he will not let Mom or Agnes aid him with anything. And how is he coping? It's very awful. Of course he needs assistance. There was no one to help him without his mother, so they led him to the blocks. Tony gave him a separate room in his home and hired a nurse to care for him. He has a physiotherapist. Of course Tony can afford it. Yes, this jerk has plenty of money. That is something we all know. It's very sad, Jerry. I see him on a daily basis, but he refuses to speak with me or Katie. I believe he discovered something we were all aware of but did not tell him. Now he believes that the entire family has betrayed him. He is so depressed that seeing him makes me want to cry. I can imagine. Poor guy. What a harsh price to pay for all his efforts. He has always been a faithful husband and a wonderful father, an honest, hard-working, and excellent breadwinner. And look how things turned out. Shit. The brother and sister sat staring at the table, deeply in meditation. Kelly finally looked across the table and met her brother's gaze. "I understand how shocking this is for you. I hate to inform you," she admitted. "But I love you, Jerry. We all love. I don't think this changes anything between us. Katie knows I'm speaking to you, and she'll say the same thing. She couldn't be present just now. But that will happen tomorrow. By the way, she's sending her regards. It is a 2-story mini mansion with a large landscaped courtyard, swimming pool, and circular flower garden. Uncle Tony had 3 car dealerships and several other businesses. His home was a symbol of wealth in this small town. Frank Kilroy and Anthony Blaylock have developed an unusual friendship. Tony's business success, which contrasted with Gilroy's modest financial situation, made their friendship unlikely over time. Of course, once Jerry learned about Tony and his mother's affair, everything made a lot more sense. Jerry and Kelly were met at the door by a gloomy and Agnes. Kelly and Agnes embraced and kissed. Then Jerry hugged the elderly woman. The hug was tight, and as they pulled away, it became awkward. She was still a stunning woman, slender and elegantly dressed, with perfectly styled silver hair. "Thanks for coming, Jerry," Agnes said sincerely. "I hope that your presence here will cheer up your father." "I hope so too." When they were led into the living room, Uncle Tony appeared. He stood over 6 feet tall and wore a high-end silk suit. On his feet were patent leather shoes made of high-quality leather. The older man stepped forward with a confident smile, hugged Kelly, and shook Jerry, but his gaze was fixed on his son's face. He attempted to say something, but the words came out slurred. Jerry initially leaned closer to hear the man's weak words. He began to pull back, nodding as if he understood. But Frank held his son's hand firmly, repeating the words many times before. During their uneasy discourse, he noticed a spark of recognition in Jerry's eyes. Tony and Agnes left the room, leaving them alone. Jerry suddenly comprehended what he was saying. He loved him and would always be his son. Jerry felt tears spring up in his eyes. He noticed a sniffling sound next to him and looked at Kelly. When she heard what Frank said, she burst into tears, hiding her face with her hands, bold that he couldn't express exactly what he intended. Jerry sensed his father becoming furious. As a result, he backed away, embarrassed that he couldn't comprehend him. They sat with Frank for a little more as Jerry chatted about his wife and other minor issues surrounding his business and family. Frank's expression became nasty. He looked aside from his, "I wish I'd said nothing at all." Holy stuff, Jerry was thinking. However, she does not appear to be upset, and he was shocked by how calmly she handled the situation. Her disclosure most likely caused her husband's stroke. Jerry expected her to be humiliated or apologetic about her infidelity, considering that it was her fault. "I'm not sure what came over me," she proceeded with a groan. "I anticipated Frank's reaction to learning about my adultery would be negative. That's why I never informed him. It was just something between Tony, myself, and Agnes, of course. It has never harmed my marriage. Frank has been unaffected over the years. How long has this gone on? Jerry asked in a neutral tone. For a while. From time to time, his mother informed him casually. Tony and I dated briefly in high school before he married Agnes. It's not serious. People were dating back then. Agnes had a few guys. She dated occasionally, as did Tony and I. We were all really good pals. You already know that I'm not foolish, and I did not tell him anything like that. I just told him the truth about what happened back then. He should appreciate it. I was very honest. I'm sure Dad is relieved to hear the truth, Jerry stated angrily. Maybe he isn't happy. She responded reproachfully, but now that he knows, he'll simply sat down with his mother and gave him an odd look as he left the room. Jerry stepped into the library to contemplate through the sliding glass doors. He noticed Agnes on the terrace at the back of the home, sitting at a table drinking coffee. He walked out and sat down at her table. She hugged him, poured him a cup of coffee, and they began talking. We never felt that was a negative thing, Agnes told him openly. Edith and I were extremely close while we were roommates, and we did everything together. She gave Jerry a knowing glance as she spoke. She had dated Tony before I met him, but she continued to accompany us on occasions after we began dating. I believe Tony still had affection for her, therefore it was logical that she was present. She was such a lovely girl. Everyone adored her, and I truly enjoyed her company. Tony, too. We didn't consider it a terrible thing. And then Dad left for school. Jerry inquired tentatively. Did you and Tony just take her out to dinner? Yes, dinner, dancing, drinking, laughing. She sought a vulnerable moment. He can be extremely persuasive, you know. She gave a big laugh. He's simply cute, always has been and will be. I'm certain of it. Jerry felt even more disgusted than when he abandoned his mother. Neither of them were concerned about their involvement with Tony. He left the elderly woman alone with her lovely memories of the past days and returned to the house. His thoughts were racing until he suddenly remembered what into the garage? The old man's angry look vanished immediately. His eyes brightened, and he began to nod up and down anxiously. Okay, I understand where they are. I believe you want them to be with you. I will go fetch them, Dad. I will be right back. Jerry headed to his parents' house. It was not far. He took his own key and headed to the garage. He remembered sitting here and watching his father work on the automobile, trying to earn some. This time they hugged for a long while. The old man did not want to let him leave. When they eventually parted, he had tears in his eyes and on his cheeks. You make me cry. Jerry confessed frankly, clearly emotional. He told the old guy, I'll be back tomorrow, Dad. Do not worry, I will assist you get back on your feet. I didn't know everything that had happened before, but now I do. I'm here for you and will help you. You'll feel better than ever in no time. Do you hear me? Old man? Frank nodded excitedly. He gazed carefully as his tall, muscular, dark-haired son exited the room. Jerry returned home and dressed in less than a minute. Kelly also dressed quickly and traveled with Jerry, who rushed back to the Blaylock mansion. As they neared the final turn, it had been around half an hour since the explosion. They noticed flashing emergency lights from fire vehicles and police cars in front of the Blaylock, but he could get out. It appears that there was an explosion, possibly one involving gas. We will investigate and determine the cause, but there is nothing we can do today. I apologize for your loss. Jerry drove Kelly home. They sat in the living room and barely slept. The next day they returned to the house and discovered detectives digging through the smoking ashes. Jerry introduced himself and was permitted to get closer. The detectives began questioning him about what they knew. Jerry did not identify the equipment he had brought, but he did say he believed there were how the link got destroyed, but it survived the blast. Based on my experience, I can state that it was not a leak. This line was specifically disconnected. The man leaned in closer, speaking softly to his brother and sister. It's amusing because the body at the disconnect line was holding a pipe wrench in its hand. In your hand? Kelly. Okay then. Thank you for this information. Good luck. Here is my business card. If you have any questions. The man replied nicely, handing him his business card. I'm sad for your parents. I'm not sure what happened, but it doesn't look like an accident right now. Jerry and Kelly exchanged glances as they departed. He now knew for certain that his father had finally exacted revenge on his adulterous wife and her lover, or lovers. If Agnes was involved, as Jerry suspected, Frank would want to make sure his son knew he had exacted revenge on them. Planned child. Guilty of my parents' separation. My father departed when I was 5 years old and never returned as a youngster. I was bullied at school and mistreated at home. I only needed my mother's affection, an elementary form of acceptance that I had never gotten. Despite the hurdles, I progressed in my studies, devoted 12 years to them. I enrolled to Kingston University in South London to escape the stresses of my home life. Holly and I first met at university. She had an incredible body that exuded beauty and self-confidence. Unlike her, I was an introvert. Holly graduated from university with a degree in creative writing, while I was pursuing a master's degree in mechanical engineering and design. I lacked the confidence to approach her because she was so attractive to males. With her dark hair and alluring brown eyes, her beauty appeared unachievable to me. The men who courted her were outgoing and popular. Suddenly, one of Holly's pals struck up a conversation with me at a party, and Holly joined him. Despite my lack of experience without increased income, while our girls were at school and I was preoccupied with work, I discovered Holly was having an affair with a man from our university. I initially doubted who her lover could be and suspected a classmate who had recently relocated to the neighborhood. Arguing with Holly about my thoughts proved fruitless. She simply laughed at my anxieties. Despite this, a steady work and income enabled me to buy a lovely home. Holly insisted on choosing a home that matched her status, whatever that was. Despite some reservations, I eventually agreed, and we purchased a lovely 5-bedroom detached property in Southampton in a buyer-friendly market. We got a great price while I was still with their mother. Surprised by her candor, I listened as Eva, who had always been reserved like me, sadly informed me about the allegations about her mother's affair with Henry Walker from my job. Although the news was unexpected, I wasn't entirely surprised. Despite the urge to explore her conduct over the years, I abstained, knowing that it would generate family strife. She stared at me with indifference and scorn. It took me a bit to muster the guts to bring up the subject. I approached Holly about her affair with another man, and she denied it, saying it didn't matter. I was surprised and recoiled, expecting her to explain her actions. She acknowledged her admiration for me as a breadwinner and friend, but she also admitted that she has some wants that I cannot provide. Her frank confession piqued my interest, and I inquired as to whether she was disloyal. Holly emphasized that it was solely about the physical connection, with no emotional or mental engagement. Her brave confession astounded. Throughout our 22-year relationship, I have continuously showed loyalty and concern for her wishes. But now it was clear to everyone that I was being duped, eroding my authority among my loved ones. The next day, when I arrived at my office, I ran into Henry Walker, a man that my father may have died before my graduation. I limited my search to 3 alternatives and headed to genealogical forums for more information. When I was buried in thought, my boss, Jack, summoned me to his office. Jack, a successful but ethically questionable individual, wanted to talk with me, even though I was already considering leaving due to his activities. His strong reasons and great remuneration compelled me to stay. It was then that I learned of his romance with his secretary, Olivia, which he kept hidden from his third wife. A clear indication that I had become the target of their amusement. As I was returning to my office, it suddenly occurred to me that my presence there was no longer important to me. I've worked hard to pay for my daughter's school, and only now have I realized I'm unintentionally funding my wife's infidelity. Despite being pleased with basic pleasures and avoiding excesses, I spent a substantial portion of my money on my wife and luxuries, which made home. Holly greeted me with a smile and prepared dinner. Despite my reservations, I ended up joining her for supper. Even after devoting endless hours to our financial obligations and goals, all I got in return was disdain and derision. I got to the point where I drove an old car so she could have a newer one, but she still grumbled about unmet wants and threatened to start a relationship with a younger man unless I accepted it, and kept the truth from me for many years. It shocked me to find that he died of alcohol intoxication when I was just 11 years old. My grandma constantly blamed my mother for his troubles and mental health. New cousins. They never gave up on me and encouraged me to keep going.